this in just a month and 10 days or so. There's a study that is now out. It has not been peer-reviewed. It's from economists Leonardo Bernstein, Akash Rao, Christopher Roth, David Yanagzawa Drott, and it focused on Fox News programming in February and early March. Using both a poll of Fox News viewers over age 55 and publicly available data on television watching patterns, they calculate that Fox viewers who watched Hannity rather than Tucker Carlson,
right?
So they're both on Fox. It's really controlling for stuff. We're less likely to adhere to social distancing rules, and that areas where more people watched Hannity relative to Carlson. I mean, think about this. This is just a disparity within Fox News viewers versus Fox News viewers versus the rest of the population.
Right.
Had higher local rates of infection and death. Quote, greater exposure to Hannity relative to Tucker Carlson tonight leads to a greater number of COVID-19 cases and deaths, they write. A one standard deviation increase in relative viewership of Hannity relative to Carlson is associated with approximately 30% more COVID-19 cases on March 14th and 21% more COVID-19 deaths on March 28th. It's a working paper. It hasn't been peer-reviewed, hasn't been published in a journal yet, but it is completely predictable. And I think we're going to see more of this. And so when these guys were on there hyping hydroxychloroquine as like it's just motivating people to not take things like social distancing seriously, to not take this entire thing seriously. And now we have the CDC that is basically telling us when we get to the fall, because here's the thing, again, the virus is not going away. It's very possible that we have a much higher percentage of the population that has had it than we know, because we know that there are cases that are asymptomatic. There's data coming out of some of these like prisons where everybody has it, apparently. In Ohio, where a huge number of people were asymptomatic, had it asymptomatic. Hard to know, but it's conceivable. It's one hypothetical that at least is plausible, that many of us have already had it. And, you know, particularly coming out of a place like New York.
Yeah.
And we just don't know it because there's no testing for antibodies yet. But
was it, I think Matt was saying in the prep that, you know, South Korea, where they have great testing and an incredible health service, and they basically are testing, you know, I don't know if everybody, but they are testing a lot.
Testing asymptomatic.
They're testing. Yeah. And so I think it's, what was it? It was a 29 or 30%. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, but yeah, I mean, yeah, massive difference. Yeah.
Than what it was in Italy, where they're just testing people who have
right.
who are showing symptoms.
Who are showing symptoms. Yeah.
And so it's conceivable this is the case. But regardless, even if not, you know, they suspect that maybe 1% of the population right now in America has got it. But even if they're wrong and it's, let's say, 15% or 20%, the fact of the matter is the virus is still there. It is just as contagious. It is just as lethal. When we get to the fall, we're going to have our annual flu epidemic. Now, people hopefully will be able to get flu shots. I imagine there will be an attempt to get more flu shots, but it's unclear to me that they'll be able to produce more. I hope they're starting to do that now, but it's also difficult to predict maybe this far out which strain of flu vaccine is the best one for them. It's going to could be theoretically harder to get flu shots because people might be less inclined to go into their pharmacy full of people to get a flu shot, or their doctor or wherever. But even if we presume the same amount of flu vaccination that people generally get in the fall, the fact is, we've heard this ad nauseum, 25 to 60,000 people a year die of the flu.
Right.
Now, it's somewhat predictable, but which is good because then we know, you know, but the problem that we're going to have is if we are out in the open, and this year, apparently the number of flu deaths was lower because for a month or two in March, people were staying at home, and there was less traveling of the flu virus, just the regular flu virus. But if we are out and about, we're not only going to have the flu virus, on top of it, we're going to have coronavirus, which means that our hospitals are going to be even more jammed than they were those weeks in March, where we nearly tipped the scales. So that's why the CDC is warning against what we're seeing in these southern states and whatnot now. Here is Bill Barr, and this is all part of the plan. We want the states to basically, and when they say something, open up, it doesn't open up. We know that a lot of people are not going to go out and go to these shops. What they're really trying to do is they're trying to lessen their unemployment burden. They're trying to make it like their numbers are different. We saw this, in Florida when there was no coronavirus. We're going to make it hard for people to sign up for unemployment, and therefore we have less unemployed. That's the way it works. Yep. Just because our numbers don't reflect that. And that's what I think a lot of this is trying to do. They are trying to basically hide the reality of what's going on. And here's Bill Barr now adding this pressure by telling Hugh Hewitt that if governors try and play it too safe for their citizens, we're going to join legal actions to try and reverse it. Here it is.
In their states.
Yeah, but theoretically, we also have 42 U.S.C. 1983, and it has occurred to me that if someone gets out of control, the best answer is not screaming at your television. It may be to litigate against individuals who are abusing your rights, and that is a long-standing tradition in the United States. It happens.
Pause it for 1 second. Go back just a little bit. Go back a couple of those, because I want people to hear, Bill Barr talk about states' rights and blah, blah, blah. And then you go, well, yes, except for when we don't like states' rights. And therefore, there's some tort actions that we can take. Go ahead.
To use your analogy at the state level, will citizens be able to use either the Fifth Amendment's prohibition on condemnation without compensation, or 42 U.S.C. 1983 to bring actions against the governments that were obviously indifferent to that blunt instrument's time to be put away?
Again, that's such a general hypothetical, bereft of any facts or, what exactly the consequences and the actions of the government are. I really can't answer that. But, one of the reasons we have federalism is because the people provide a much greater check over their governors and the state officials than they do over a more remote federal government. And the first line of defense for people is the political process in their states.
Yeah, but theoretically, we also have 42 U.S.C. 1983, and it has occurred to me that if someone gets out of control, the best answer is not screaming at your television. It may be to litigate against individuals who are abusing your rights, and that is a long-standing tradition in the United States. It happens.
Well, if people bring those lawsuits, we'll take a look at it at that time, and if we think it's justified, we would take a position. That's what we're doing now. We're looking carefully at a number of these rules that are being put into place, and if we think one goes too far, we initially try to jawbone the governors into rolling them back or adjusting them, and if they're not, and people bring lawsuits, we file statement of interest and side with the plaintiffs. And at this stage, and we're at a sort of a sensitive stage where we're really transitioning to starting a process of trying to get the nation back up and running, I think that's the best approach. As lawsuits develop, as specific cases emerge in the states, we'll take a look at them.
Now, all right, and so there you have it. I mean, Bill Barr is basically saying, hey, give us a little time, but we're going to hit a point where we're going to welcome these lawsuits, and we're going to come in and we're going to support you against these states that are trying to be too careful for their citizenry. They are. This is it. I mean, they are basically saying we're going to rev this stuff back up, and it's just Granny. It's just Granny.
It goes back to the lieutenant governor of Texas, what he said about a month ago. He was just a little bit before schedule about basically, grandparents sacrificing themselves so the economy can move. I also just want to say, I think it's really important to look at how these reopened protests are playing out. And I'll keep saying the caveat that I think there is a chunk of people there who are obviously, they should not be outside protesting, but I do think there is if you don't provide people an actual social safety net, there are going to be some people that are going to be drawn to these protests during this time. And I think we need to be very thoughtful about how we talk about them. And that's a very important thing in my view. But then there's also, the AstroTurf element. And I just think that, just look at how this works. You have, we know the DeVos family in Michigan was backing those protests. Then we have Bill Barr come out on UU it and signal what's about to come. And Trump is tweeting about it. So if you go out in the street for a right-wing protest, you get an immediate sugar rush. Look at what I'm doing immediately gets a response from the most powerful sectors of society. And there's a reason why they're being facilitated to protest right now, because this is going to come. This is definitely going to happen. I also want to say, and I'm still obsessed with this and concerned about this, but Bill Barr talking about people being in house arrest-like conditions. Please, let's not forget that this is a guy who requested several weeks ago, right, that in times of emergency, that essentially we should scrap habeas corpus. I mean, that's really what he's saying. Allow people to be in jail for indefinite detention if judges can't get to them. Now, of course, instead of letting go of nonviolent offenders, protecting public health, not subjecting people in prisons to these horrible conditions, there's the human rights issue. Then there's also the broader political and civil liberties issues at stake. So, I mean, but please just let's always remember that when Bill Barr has anything to say about,
of course, it's absurd. It's absurd. Here is Brian Kemp, again, part of this coalition of southern states. You might almost call them a confederacy.
We got a little organization that we're working on. It's very Coen Brothers movie. Talking
about his plan to open up. Now, the federal government has released some standards as to guidelines as to when to open up. Georgia doesn't come close to meeting any of these in terms of percentage of testing, in terms of infection rates. None of it. But the bottom line is he wants to kick people off unemployment before he even has to put them on the rolls. And the way you do that is you just say, here's an impossible task for you. Come in and work in an incredibly dangerous situation. Oh, you won't? Well, then you're not unemployed. You're just deciding to stay home. Here's Brian Kemp.
Screening. So let's say that the gym decides that they're going to test everybody's temperature when they walk in. But as we all know, there are asymptomatic people who are contagious to every person that they come in contact with potentially. So once you've got a fever, it's already too late. You've already, been 5 days of being someone who can spread that disease. So how are you going to screen these people who want to go to these businesses?
The same could be happening at the grocery store and other places. That's why the fitness owners, I have great confidence in them spreading people out when they're doing a workout, doing this additional sanitation that we've all been, learned how to do now, and taking those precautions.
Spreading people out.
He's justifying why you can open up gyms because it's just like the grocery store. Just spreads people out, right? We all know that they don't cram in all the exercise machines next to each other. And it's not just like at the grocery store, when you go to the grocery store where you have the people next to you huffing and puffing and sweating and shedding literally all of their body fluids upon you. Go ahead.
With hand sanitation and having the folks working in the facilities wearing masks and other things. And we'll be putting those guidelines out. And listen, if people don't want to go, Martha, they don't have to. If people don't want to open the gym, They don't have to. But when you close somebody's business down and take the livelihood of that individual and those employees, and they are literally at the face of losing everything, I'm willing to give them the
I'm willing to risk other people's lives for that. That's what I'm willing to do. Look, it's just like the supermarket. It's just, in this instance, they're sweating and breathing and spitting.
I mean, just to underline how ridiculous that is, we are so ill-equipped for this response that in some places that are much less developed in the United States, like